Welcome back to Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ollie Hayes, and today I'm bringing you the extra time match view for Wolverhampton Wanderers 2, Everton nil. Everton exiting the Carabao Cup at the second hurdle at Molineux after a pretty dismal display against Wolves. So today I'm just here to unpack my extra time thoughts, and we might as well start with the starting 11. And I think Moyes got this one badly wrong. I think the way he lined up with McNeil, Alcaraz, obviously Tim Boone in midfield as well, I think he got it badly wrong. I think it showed a little bit of disrespect to Wolves, and I think it showed a little bit of disrespect to the Carabao Cup as a competition. I think, we've not won a trophy since 1995, and we want to be winning trophies. We want to get back to the top and winning silverware. So to line up like that when Wolves had pretty much a full strength 11. Listen, I know Wolves made some changes. But yeah, David Moyes, in my opinion, got it badly wrong with the setup. Starting Dwight McNeil off the left hand side, starting Charlie Alcaraz. I think if you were going to rest one of the three instrumental creative players that play behind the striker, then fine. I think you can rest one, but resting all three, it was a recipe for disaster. And I think going into the ground at Molineux, I was always a little bit worried that we were going to come unstuck in terms of creating chances. And listen, I think Tyler Dibling, I did want to see Tyler Dibling start. I think that was a positive, definitely, but to leave out all three of Kane and Dewsbury Hall, Jack Grealish, and Iliman Ndiaye, I think was a real recipe for disaster and a real danger and a big risk from David Moyes, which obviously he took. But also, I look at it as well with the way that David Moyes lined up the starting 11. We've got 6 days between now and the next game. Obviously, by the time it was the end of the game at Molineux, it was 6 days until we play West Ham at Hill Dickinson Stadium and the Monday night football. So to leave that big of a gap, but also to rest the players for that amount of time. Listen, I know it's fixture congestion is a big thing for players, and they might have been carrying a little bit of fatigue, but I think to leave all three out was a big risk from David Moyes, and obviously he wanted to take it, and we know what happened, but we'll get on to that later in the video. But obviously moving into the first half now. You could tell we were off it straight away. I think that the first thing that I thought was the press wasn't there. We weren't pressing as highly as we have done. Certainly in the last 60 minutes against Liverpool, I think the press was pretty good. I think it was pretty consistent, but we weren't really pressing Wolves at all. We weren't really creating many chances. I think the bulk of the chances came from Wolves in that first half. There was a couple for Everton. Charlie Alcaraz tried his best to strive from midfield and really create some chances. I think he had probably one of the better halves than the majority of the players in that first half. Tyler Dibling as well. I think it will come for him. I think there's definitely a player in there. He's someone that looks really comfortable on the ball, but he's just lacking that little bit of confidence at the moment. So in that first half, we tried to see him make a few turns. He dropped the shoulder a couple of times, but there wasn't really anything of cutting edge from Tyler Dibling, but he's still young. It's going to come for Tyler Dibling. I think there's definitely a player there, but him and Charlie Alcaraz were the two really that had sort of stood out for me, that were the ones that could have created something if we were to create anything in that half. But that being said, we did look like we were off it, and it was no surprise that Wolves went 1-0 up through Marshall Monetzi. A pretty dismal defending display all round, all evening really, but this one was pretty poor. Mark Travers parrying the ball straight into Marshall Monetti's path, who took one touch and scored into the back of the pretty empty net. And obviously, as I said before, I wasn't surprised to see us go 1-0 down in the game. We weren't good value for money at all. So yeah, to see us go 1-0 down was pretty, it was coming really. I do think it was coming. And we didn't really pick up more after that. You kind of see a goal sometimes be a little bit of a wake-up call for a team. I think for Everton, it was the 2 goals against Liverpool on Saturday that was a bit of a wake-up call, and we settled into the game. But that being said, we didn't, for the rest of that first half, we didn't really settle at all. Wolves were coming forward. I think Wolves were very unlucky not to go into the break 2-0 up. They had a big chance, a big overload with about 30 seconds to go in the first half, and they didn't take it. So to go in at 1-0, I think we were probably a little bit lucky to go in at 1-0 in my opinion. But half time obviously came around, and I was still thinking we can get something from this game. We're still massively in the game. We're doing okay. We're not 2-3 goals behind, which is what we were at half time at Anfield, for example. And Wolves didn't look anything special. They obviously were playing a little bit better than we were in that first half, but they didn't look anything special at all. So I did still feel like the game was there for the taking, and we could definitely get back into the game. And second half, it did improve. Obviously, David Moyes made a couple of changes at half time. Tieno Barry coming off, who had a pretty difficult 45 minutes up front for Everton, getting a booking for pretty much lashing out and kicking the ball in towards the Wolves fans. But he just looked a little bit off at Tieno Barry. So again, we seem to be in a difficult situation now where we're chopping and changing between Beto and Tieno Barry, and we don't really know who's better for the squad at the moment. But obviously, Tieno Barry coming off for Beto on 45 minutes, and then Charlie Alcaraz coming off at half time as well for Kane and Dewsbury Hall. Listen, Kane and Dewsbury Hall is a fantastic player. He's great on the ball, and I think the second half performance went up tenfold because he was on the pitch. I think he's a very good leader, and he's very good just for the tempo of the play from midfield. I do think he is pretty instrumental to everything that we do going forward. That being said, I do feel like it was a little bit harsh on Charlie Alcaraz to come off, but if you do have a player like Kane and Dewsbury Hall on the bench and he can lift the mood and lift the tempo tenfold, you are going to bring him on. And fair play to David Moyes, he did recognise as early as possible that it wasn't going right, and he did make the changes at pretty decent times. It's probably the only thing I can say that he got right in the performance at Molineux. But that being said, as I said, Tierney Barry coming off and Kane and Dewsbury Hall coming on, the tempo did lift a little bit. We were creating more chances. We were going forward, but I think for me the damage was already done early in that first half. With Wolves getting the goal, they could set up in that low block and pretty much set up to absorb any pressure that Everton were putting on them. They didn't really commit many men forward. It was only Tolu who came on later on in the second half for Wolves, who was really the man that was committed forward. Apart from that, Wolves had pretty much 10 men behind the ball, and in games like this, it's very difficult when you don't have your best players on the pitch. If you don't have your Jack Grealishes or your Iliman and Jais on the pitch right from the off, to go 1-0 down and still have the likes of Dwight McNeil or Charlie Alcaraz or Tim Irabunum on the pitch, I think to have them on the pitch, you're not going to create as many chances as you want to. And with Wolves, it was the perfect balance for them because they could set up in a low block and pretty much absorb any pressure that Everton were putting on them. That being said, obviously Iliman and Jai did come on, Jack Grealish did come on, and Jack Grealish completely changed the game for me once again. He was linking up well with Kane and Dewsbury Hall. I think he earned 3 fouls in 5 minutes straight away from coming on. So you can just see the model of the man. You can just see how good he is on the ball and how he does draw in defenders, which was going to help us create chances. But we just really lacked that bit of cutting edge. And as I said before, Wolves could have just set up in that low block and we couldn't really do anything. There was a couple of chances for Tim Irabunum who spooned it completely wide. Iliman Ajay had a chance pretty late on in that second half where if he'd just got the touch right and got a shot off, we would have had a great chance. But his touch let him down a little bit and it got away, and the chance sort of looped over the bar. And that was it, really. We couldn't really create much chances and anything of note, really, going forwards. Where I said it sort of at Anfield, where in that second half, we didn't really create a gilt-edged chance, which you go in, you have to score that. We didn't really create that. And I think that's becoming a theme now in the second half, where we are playing against a team that has set up to defend and we can't really break them down, which it's worrying. I'm not going to lie, it is worrying. It's something that we saw in the Sean Dyche days, which we all want to put behind us and propel ourselves up this league. But you can only do what you can do in terms of the chances you create. And if you're not creating chances and you're not giving Beto or Tieno Barry the chances to score, you're not going to score many goals, unfortunately. So that's something that definitely needs addressing in the coming weeks by David Moyes. But yeah, as I said before, that was pretty much it for the second half. And then a loose pass in midfield. Wolves get the ball, play it into behind towards Tolu, who he's running onto the ball, and Mark Travers hesitates for a minute, doesn't come out to claim the ball, and he's chipped by Tolu and makes it 2-0. And I think it was the late 80th minute. I think sort of ticking over towards added time, and at that point, it's the nail in the coffin. It's game over. We're 2-0 down away at Molineux. You're not going to get back into the game at that point. And that pretty much ended our Carabao Cup dream of going to Wembley and getting silverware this season in pretty dismal fashion, to be honest with you. It wasn't a great performance at all from many players on the pitch. Obviously, I mentioned a couple that had decent performances coming off the bench with the likes of Jack Grealish and Dewsbury Hall. I think they were okay. They weren't fantastic, but they were okay. But there was some really, really poor individual performances out there from the first one was Dwight McNeil. Listen, he looks shot of all constant confidence in an Everton shirt, Dwight McNeil. It's not for the want of trying, because I do think he does really want to make a name for himself at Everton and really break into the team, but he just looks shot of all confidence in an Everton shirt. The big signings that we made of Jack Grealish, Kane and Dewsbury Hall, Iliman Jai is obviously still number one choice for winger on that right hand side. Even Tyler Dibbling, I think, is ahead of him in the pecking order. I think that's really sort of hurt his confidence for Dwight McNeil. So, and you can really see it. He really didn't put in a great performance. Then Tim Irabunum as well. He's a player that's blown really hot and cold this season. I think in the Brighton game, I thought he was fantastic. I thought he had a really good performance against Brighton at Hill Dickinson Stadium. But then you're comparing that to performance at Molineux last night against Wolves. It's just night and day to each other, and he's just really struggling for that consistency. So maybe he's another one that you look to loan him out in January just to continue his development. But I do think he is really struggling. But yeah, that was it really. That was the pretty dismal display, summed up in obviously us exiting the Carabao Cup at the second hurdle, the third round of the Carabao Cup. And again, it's another trophy that I would have liked us to go far in this season because, as I said at the start of this video, we're starved of any silverware for a number of years, and I'd really like to see us put in a cup run. So we've still got the FA Cup after Christmas to contend in. So fingers crossed we can right the wrongs of the Carabao Cup and put in a decent FA Cup run. But yeah, as I said before, a pretty dismal showing, and it saw us exit the Carabao Cup. But attention now, it has to turn very quickly to Monday night football at Hill Dickinson Stadium against West Ham. Obviously, that's a must-win game. Graham Potter and West Ham are massively on the back foot. Graham Potter's under massive pressure at West Ham, so let's not give him an impetus to get his job back on track. Let's put the final nail in the coffin of Graham Potter and put West Ham even further down the table and further away from us. That's sort of the mentality that David Moyes needs to employ now, and get rid of the sort of over self-confidence that we maybe saw at Molineux on Tuesday night in the Carabao Cup. But yeah, as I said before, attention has to turn quickly to that, and we've got to put it right with a decent performance against West Ham. But let me know your thoughts in the comments about the obviously disappointing exit of the Carabao Cup to the hands of Wolves. Let me know your thoughts on the individual performances. Do you think some players had better games than others? What we thoughts on the likes of Tyler Dibling, Charlie Alcaraz, and even Dwight McNeil? Let me know your thoughts on him. But that is all from me today. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.